So imagine if our politicians were competing to have the best renewable energy policies. What could that look like? There are provinces in China, I was just telling Miriam, so this is me doing policy off the cuff, that I read about, who have targets of 300% renewable energy. There are so many things that our governments could be doing to win the renewables vote, yet they're not right now. So I want to take you through our campaign in 2013 when GetUp stood up to attacks on the renewable energy sector, what we learned from that experience, and how I think that the 2016 federal election is going to be our best opportunity I could possibly imagine for creating a race to the top on renewable energy. So cast your mind back. 2013, the election is just over. And I had a sense of relief in one respect, probably only one. There were some big commitments by the coalition government to protect the commitments that were already in place for renewable energy. Things like the renewable energy target, the CEFC, and a whole raft of other measures. And I thought that sort of made sense. They had a big campaign against the carbon price, but renewables are popular. The Prime Minister was on the record as saying he wouldn't touch those things. And yet, how quickly that changed. And over the coming years, we saw an absolute plummet in investment in renewable energy. I think the last figure I saw from the Climate Council put it at 90% fall in investment in renewable energy. Now, this hasn't gone away, this hasn't changed. This has set the renewable energy industry in Australia back a decade, maybe more, some economists are saying. And so, GetUp was looking at its role in this terrible situation. What could we do? Could we lobby the government? Could we run some advertising campaigns? Could we mobilise? And it just was clearly going to be ineffective. And with my experience running campaigns around Tasmania's forests in Tasmania for almost a decade, I was really aware that there must be something else at play here, because it just seemed like a huge disjunct between the popularity of renewables on the one hand and then the fact that this government was so viciously attacking it on the other. And what emerged was the role of the corporations. Every time the Abbott government would attack renewable energy policy, the share price of companies like AGL would go up. Their CEO would unashamedly issue a statement to the Australian Stock Exchange saying, you know what, this is pretty good for the value of our assets. We will see a 10% increase over the life now of our coal-fired power plants that we've just acquired, like MacGen in New South Wales. So it felt like we really needed to step up and take on these companies, because these companies were in Canberra all the time. These companies were lobbying on a daily basis. They were making large political donations, many of which aren't fully disclosed. They were employing lobbyists, and they were getting the policy outcomes that they wanted. They were shaping the future of Australia's climate, Australia's economy in many respects, and certainly the impact on our renewable energy sector. So it felt like we needed to do something to take them on. So we looked at a switching campaign to see if we could start out small. So we haven't even, unfortunately, been able to launch here in Queensland yet, because we're learning a lot as we go. We started small. We wanted to see if we could switch people at a scale that the power companies couldn't deny the impact on their bottom line, because of this huge disjunct between the majority of Australians wanting renewable energy and, on the other hand, the fact that it seemed really clear that their customers, the Australian public, were actually being used. They didn't know that their power companies, the ones that are driving the bad policies that the Abbott government was pushing through. So we worked in Victoria with a renewable energy-backed power company to see if we could switch people on a large scale. And when we got involved in Victoria, I was assuming this is going to be really hard. I'd seen a lot of ethical market research from the US and some from within Australia that the reality was, at the end of the day, when an ethical consumer got to the checkout, they were the same as everyone else, that they shopped on price. And so I'd figured that this is going to be really hard, because we're going to have to make a case that people should switch to a renewable energy-backed company and at the same time pay a bit more. The thing that really surprised me about this campaign was that when we did the research in Victoria around which companies we should work with and how we'd be able to message this to the public and our membership down there, was that we found out that the power company we were working with was rated by the Essential Services Commission, which is the independent economic regulator in Victoria, as the cheapest. St Vincent's de Paul's did their own independent assessment and they found the same. And this just seemed unimaginable to me. How could a renewable energy company be the cheapest? And the other issue that came up, of course, was the price gouging, was the main reason that the big power companies were whacking on a 30 or 40% premium above the costs of providing power, whereas the new players in the market, like the renewable energy companies, weren't gouging, basically. So that was actually the main reason. But I'd been thinking, well, surely it's more expensive to have wind power than it is to have dirty old brown-fired coal power, which is the main staple in Victoria. So this was really interesting. So we've been working on this campaign now for maybe a year and a half. Something like 15,000 GetUp members in New South Wales and Victoria have switched their household energy. This has had a huge impact on the bottom line of the big power companies. Credit Suisse and Citigroup say it's probably wiped something like $15 million off the value of those companies. And it's been useful for us in putting on the agenda the fact that consumers will walk if they're going to be firstly gouged by the power companies, but then also have power companies that are actively working against their interests, then they will go elsewhere. But it's also been important for us to really talk about the benefits of going to renewable energy, because we have now people like Bill and Siobhan. These are a great couple. They have really worked hard to push this campaign along. They're grandparents, they have 10 grandchildren, and they were sort of looking at the renewable energy space and seeing everything go backwards and wondering what they could do. They were just so disenfranchised with what the state of Australians' renewable energy would look like for their grandkids. And so they made the switch, and they say that they're now saving something like $260 a year or something of that order. But at the same time, they also have something that totally aligns with their values. And this is a conversation they're able to have with their grandkids, with their neighbours, and able to get the switch to build over time. And we're certainly a long way off putting enough pressure on the big power companies to get them to drop their attack on renewable energy or to adopt serious emissions reduction targets. AGL has made some steps in the right direction, but they're still by far and away the dirtiest and biggest polluting power company in the Southern Hemisphere. But it taught us a lot about the power of renewables and how passionate people are about it when you can give them a good entry point. When you can see that you're getting the cheaper power, when you can see your solar meter ticking over, it takes people on a journey of empowerment over their power bills, over their cost of living, but also creating the sort of economy that they want to see in Australia. So we learn a lot from this experience, and we're continuing to do so as we're going to take out this campaign to other states of Australia over the coming year or two as we slow it out gently, and we find companies that we're comfortable to work with and so forth. So this was a campaign that was completely defensive. It was in response to the Abbott government's attack on the renewable energy target in particular, but also ARENA and the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. And hopefully it helped a bit in staving off those attacks, and certainly the campaign of other organisations and the role of the senators, the crossbench senators, played a big part in protecting some of those institutions and stopping the worst from happening to the renewable energy target in particular. And then late last year, something changed. We got a new Prime Minister, I think the 5th in 5 years, or was it the 6th? And suddenly it was an opportunity to think, well, what does this mean for the policies that our members are so passionate about? What are the campaign opportunities now when we'd spent the last 2 or more years really just trying to stop things being taken backwards? And as we all, I guess, know or hope, there is an inkling that the current Prime Minister is good on the issues we care about, the issues that we're here to discuss today. I'm seeing some nods of no, I'm seeing a couple of maybes, and lots of no's. He previously lost his leadership by trying to pass an emissions trading scheme, and he said a number of things to indicate that he does support certainly some aspects of the industry, whether it's the innovation side or the opportunity for new investment markets, through to some of the clean technology. He's off hanging out with Elon Musk, I hear, in years gone by over at the Tesla factory in California. So there's some level of interest there. And so I think, when we've seen the Labor Party as well pass a strong policy with a target of 50% renewables by 2030 as their hopefully starting point of what they're offering in the race to the top is. And that's what I think we have the opportunity to see here. We have such a strong combination in renewable energy. We have an issue that is popular with the public, that provides better jobs in an economy which desperately needs them as the old industries are facing a transition out, whether they like it or not. We have something that addresses what's often the number one political issue, the one that's really often frustrating for those of us who've worked in environmental campaigning in our past, which is cost of living. The thing we're talking about today addresses this really fundamental issue. It gives people an opportunity to take control of their power bills, and that's an empowering process. And I think what that does, what renewable energy does, it helps us to democratise democracy. At the moment, the reality is clean energy policy has been dictated and controlled by the big power companies who stand to profit from stopping a transition to renewable energy. The real hope and the thing that really excites me about clean energy, about distributed power, about batteries, about solar, about microgrids, about community energy agencies, is that we can democratise democracy. For too long, a dozen maybe, companies, whether it be the big banks or the big miners or the three big power companies, have held too much sway over the direction of public policy in Australia. The technology innovation that we're seeing now, and technologists and economists will tell us is about to speed up, give us the opportunity to not only enable a technology change, that's good, that could benefit our environment, and I'm pleased about that, but I think it gives us a real opportunity to improve our democratic institutions as well, to shine a light on the institutions of who's really forming public policy in Australia in relation to clean energy, who's benefited from stopping it in the past, because we need to urgently address the transition to ensure that workers in the fossil fuel sector and the communities in which they live are supported properly, because right now no major party has a plan for those communities, and there's still the blockages, as we've seen with the logging industry in Tasmania. People want to continue to subsidise an industry that's failing. That's not the right solution, as we've seen down there. Ultimately, workers and communities suffer as a consequence when proper transition plans are not put in place. So I think we have a great opportunity to work together. And I guess the other thing we've learnt from our reactive campaign, our energy switch campaign in Victoria and New South Wales, was the power of working in coalition. We've been able to switch 15,000 people, and that's great. But to really have a fundamental change, which is what we need, a disruptive fundamental change in the energy market in Australia, we'd be needing to shift 50, 100 or 150,000 people. And it's the same this year as we go into an election year. We need to organise in our communities. Political science tells us that the most powerful way we can shift the values and shift the mindsets of people within our communities is through face-to-face conversations. And that takes effort, it takes time, but it's also a lot of fun. So I think I would say, happy Valentine's Day to you, sexy solar citizens. Thanks for being here. I think 2016 is an amazing opportunity for us to create a race to the top and actually be super ambitious. We need the policies that Miriam's outlined, but we can also do even better and expect even more of our politicians this year. Thanks so much.